This is Democracy Watch. I'm joined by my co-host, voting rights attorney, and the founder of Democracy Docket, Marc Elias. So, Marc, a few episodes back, we spoke about a major Supreme Court ruling that was in Allen versus Milligan that would mandate that Alabama create a second majority black district. It looks like Republicans are defying the Supreme Court's directive here. So, first of all, can you explain what these Alabama Republicans are doing?
They're breaking the law. I mean, you just kind of said it, right? They're defying the court's order. They were ordered by a three-judge panel, which included two judges appointed by Donald Trump, to draw a new map because the map they drew was illegal. They were like, no, you don't understand. You're wrong. This needs to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed it was illegal. And so this was their chance to fix the illegality, to draw a new map, which has two majority black districts. And instead of doing that, they have been engaged in what can really be described as cynical political theater. That's what they're doing. It's cynical political theater of drawing a new map that does not comply with the court's order, and they can't do it, and they're not going to get away with it.
Okay, so I might be betraying my naivety here, but the legislature did pass those two different maps, neither one of which comport with the directive from both the federal court and the U.S. Supreme Court. How can they do this?
They can't. I mean, this is the thing. What they're doing, they're not allowed to do. But here's the escape hatch, and this is, I think, gets a little bit, Brian, to the politics of what I think they're doing. Is they're not going to get thrown in jail for not drawing a proper, right? It's just what's going to happen is the maps they draw just will be disregarded and the court will draw its own map.
Okay.
So what they're doing, I think, and why I call it cynical political theater, is they want to be able to say to their voters, we were forced by the court into doing something, and then we did the thing that we did to sort of not effectuate the court's order because we were standing up for you. Right. We're standing up for Republicans. And knowing full well that the end of the way this ends is that the court disregards what the legislature is doing and just draws its own map. And then they get to say, you see, it was the runaway judiciary. It wasn't us. So I think that's what they're doing.
Is there a way that Republicans could stall this process and try to keep one black district that way? Or will this be quickly enough litigated to ensure that it is resolved in time for 2024?
There is no chance they're going to be able to stall this process. I mean, the court literally gave them a week to do this. The court has indicated that if they don't pass a compliant map by the 21st or so, the court itself will appoint a special master to draw a compliant map.
Okay.
So this is not they're not going to be able to stall their way out of this. They stalled their way out of a compliant map for 2022. They're not going to get away with that in 2024. And I think they know that. I think they are just laying the groundwork to be able to tell their supporters that they didn't go along with drawing a second majority black district, which is really a sorry, disgraceful state of the Republican Party, that's what they think they need to do to placate their voters.
Right. With all the issues plaguing the country right now, that's what they're focusing all of their time and energy on, is making sure that black voters don't have a voice in our democracy. Marc, if the legislature doesn't want to comply, which very clearly they don't, is there any incentive for them to play ball? Could the court ultimately, and I know that you said, they're not going to jail them, but could there be any punishment? Is there any type of sanctions, or is that not an option when you're dealing with the legislature?
No, that's not really an option here. They're not going to get in trouble. The court's not going to sanction them. The court may note that they didn't comply with the order, but I think the court will then just proceed to a remedy. I mean, the thing that the Republicans are doing is they are giving up the ability to shape what that second majority black district looks like. And that may sound like a small thing if all you're caring about is the partisan composition or the racial composition of the delegation. But it's actually, if you think about it, it is the job of the legislature in Alabama to try to look out for the state, to make sure that this city and that city are in separate districts or in the same districts, that voters are able to be in communities of interest. And they are completely abdicating their role in doing that within the construct of federal law. Instead, they're passing maps that they know will never be adopted by the court, and then just saying to the court, okay, here, we're not going to do our job, so you have to do it for us.
You know, when you're dealing with a state like Alabama, their permanent legislative committee on reapportionment is 70% Republican. So who is there to actually ensure that the process is followed properly?
Yeah, so ultimately the courts, and that's a really sad state for democracy because, Brian, every one of those legislators, every one of the Republicans in Congress swears an oath to uphold the law and the Constitution. And let's be clear, the Republicans in the legislature in Alabama right now are violating that oath. Right? They may get away with it politically. In fact, they may think it's a benefit for them politically. They may get away with it even without sanction from the court, which I think they will. But let's be clear, they are violating their oath to do the thing that they were elected to do. And it is a shame that in states like Alabama, we saw, a few months ago, the absolute travesty in Tennessee with what the Republican majority there. You see these Republican-controlled legislatures willing to violate their oath, not do the job that they were sent to do in protecting the citizens of their states.
Now, we've also spoken about other states where these Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act cases are concerned as it relates to Allen versus Milligan. That's Louisiana. We also have cases coming up in Texas and Georgia. Do you anticipate similar antics in any of those states?
I think we're already seeing some of those antics in Georgia. I'm sorry, in Louisiana, in Georgia as well. But in Louisiana, we already see, the Republicans in Louisiana are not going to just say, okay, we were wrong, and we now need to comply with the law. Instead, they've already sort of told the court that they read Allen v. Milligan as a victory for them, which obviously it isn't. It objectively isn't. It isn't what they argued to the Supreme Court would happen if this happened in Allen v. Milligan. But they're going to use every delaying tactic possible. I just don't think it's going to be successful for them in those three states. Like, it's not going to be successful for them, obviously, in Alabama. I don't think it's going to be successful for them in Louisiana, given how far along that case is, or in Georgia. I think, the court there in Georgia is also on a fairly fast time turn. And so the Republicans are not going to be able to stall this out.
Okay, and we've spoken about this before, but could you give an update on what we're looking at first off in Georgia as it relates to these Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act cases?
Yeah, so there's actually been some recent good news in Georgia, and so I'm glad you asked. The trial court there rejected the state's motion for summary judgment, which is basically a way to short circuit the case, and set it for trial. So that case is going to trial on September 5th of this year. So, there's been a lot of concern in all of these states, including in Georgia, that the cases won't move fast enough that Republicans will be able to stall this out. That case is going to go to trial on September 5th in the state of Georgia. And I predict we're going to have a favorable ruling in that by the end of September, in plenty of time for there to be new maps for the 2024 election.
And before we get over to Texas, which is the last state concerning this whole Section 2 series, how many seats may be at play in Georgia?
So Georgia, like Alabama, involves one additional black majority district in the Atlanta region is the Georgia case. Louisiana involves one additional seat, and Alabama obviously involves one seat. Texas is a whole other. The stakes in Texas are much bigger.
Okay, yeah. So could we get into now what we're looking at in Texas?
Yeah. So Texas is a more complicated case because it involves more seats. It involves more parts of the state. And it involves seats that both involve or violations of the Voting Rights Act that both involve denying Latino voters their opportunity to elect their candidate choice, and black voters their opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. So in Texas, you're looking at someplace between 4 and 6 seats that should be added as minority districts. The majority of those would be majority Latino districts, both along the border, but also in other parts of the state. And then in Harris County, in addition to additional Latino districts, you would have one or more additional black districts. That case is moving at a slower pace. But again, I expect the federal courts know when they're being played. And even if a federal judge isn't going to vote your way, they understand that election cases have to move in time for the elections. So win, lose, or draw, I really do expect that these judges are going to expedite these cases so that there are rulings in time for the 2024 elections.
Okay, got it. And so, between these 4 states, Texas, Georgia, Louisiana, and Alabama, we could be looking at 7 to 9 new seats. And of course, in the last episode, we discussed any impending changes to the New York congressional map. That might be as many as 4 to 6 seats in Democrats' favor. So obviously a lot to look out for as far as redistricting and new maps are concerned. So with that said, we'll obviously stay on top of this stuff. Marc, thank you to all that you and your team do to protect voting rights across the country. So for anybody watching, if you want to support Marc and his team, then please sign up for Democracy Docket. It's a free news outlet focused on voting and elections. The link is right here on this screen, and it's also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.